I discovered the HOA president and her family were secretly building an illegal gas station on my inherited farmland, forging documents and threatening me, until they realized I was the county inspector with the power to shut them down. But how could I fight back when the corrupt family controlled everything from the sheriff's office to my own workplace? I never expected trouble when I inherited Grandpa's farm. The 15 acres of rolling hills had been in my family for generations. Every weekend, I'd drive out from my apartment in town to tend the vegetable garden and feed the chickens. My regular job as the county building inspector kept me busy during the week, but this land was my true home. That peaceful Tuesday morning changed everything. I was collecting eggs when I heard engines rumbling near the south pasture. Curious, I walked over the hill and froze. 3 people in matching polo shirts were placing stakes in MY Field, while a woman with blonde hair and designer sunglasses directed them. "Excuse me," I called, jogging down the hill. "What are you doing on my property?" The blonde woman turned, her smile cold as winter. "Oh, you must be the current resident. I'm Eleanor Hargrove, president of Meadowlark Estates Homeowners Association." "Homeowners Association?" I repeated, confused. "This is private farmland. There's no association here." Eleanor's smile tightened. "According to our documents, this property was incorporated into our development last month. We're preparing to break ground on our new gas station next week." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I never agreed to anything like that." "The paperwork is finalized," she said, handing me a folder. "You can direct any concerns to our lawyers." I opened it to find official-looking documents claiming my south pasture had been rezoned for commercial use. My signature was at the bottom, except I'd never signed anything. "This isn't my signature," I said, my voice rising. "This is forgery." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Be careful with accusations. Our association has excellent legal representation." One of her crew, a tall man with a clipboard, stepped forward. "Ma'am, we have all necessary approvals. This area will soon be the Meadowlark Convenience Center." "I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone. Eleanor laughed softly. "Go ahead. Sheriff Daniels is on our HOA board." My thumb hovered over the dial button as I realized she might be right. In our small county, connections mattered. I needed to think strategically. "You have 24 hours to remove your equipment from my property," I said firmly. "After that, I'll file trespassing charges." I didn't tell them who I was, the very county inspector whose approval they'd need for any commercial construction. That information might prove useful later. Eleanor's smile never faltered. "We'll be back tomorrow with our surveyor to mark the boundaries. I suggest you review those documents carefully before making threats." As they drove away, I noticed something odd about their work vehicle. No company name, just a plain white truck with tinted windows. I quickly took photos of everything they'd left behind, including the survey stakes with MGC printed on them. Back in my farmhouse, I spread the documents across the kitchen table. The rezoning application appeared legitimate with county stamps and signatures, but something felt wrong. The approval date coincided with my vacation last month, when I was hiking in the mountains with no cell service. How convenient. I called my colleague Marcos from the zoning department. "Meadowlark Estates?" he repeated after I explained. "Never heard of them applying for anything. Can you check if there's a file?" They claim my property was rezoned for a gas station. I heard keyboard clicking. "Nothing under that name. Wait. There's a permit application for a neighborhood convenience center on Route 16. Is that near you?" My blood ran cold. Route 16 ran alongside my south pasture. "Who approved it?" I asked. "That's weird," Marco said. "It's stamped with Commissioner Jackson's signature, but he was on medical leave then. And your signature is here too as the secondary inspector." "I never signed anything," I insisted. "And I'd never approve a gas station on an active watershed." "Something's not right," Marcos agreed. "The environmental impact statement is missing, and there's no public hearing record." As we spoke, my doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw a county sheriff's car in my driveway. "I need to go," I told Marcos. "Can you make copies of everything you find?" The deputy at my door wasn't anyone I recognized. A bad sign in our small county where I knew most officials. "Are you the property owner?" he asked, his face expressionless. "Yes, for 5 generations," I replied. "How can I help you?" He handed me an envelope. "This is a cease and desist order. You're prohibited from interfering with the Meadowlark Estates development project." "On what grounds?" I demanded. "Harassment of work crews," he said flatly. "Ms. Hargrove filed a complaint this afternoon." I stared at him in disbelief. "They're the ones trespassing on my land." The deputy's radio crackled. "Check the back of the order. The county has approved temporary access for survey and preparation work." As he walked away, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off if you know what's good for you." I looked from the message to the fake documents to the sheriff's car disappearing down my driveway. Someone with serious influence wanted my land, and they weren't playing by the rules. That night, I dug through Grandpa's old desk until I found what I needed. The original property maps and deeds, clearly showing the boundaries that had remained unchanged for decades. I also found something unexpected. A letter warning about developers trying to buy surrounding properties for a planned highway exit. The letter was dated just weeks before Grandpa's death. Standing at my kitchen window, watching headlights slowly drive past my farm for the 3rd time that evening, I realized this fight was bigger than just me. And it was just beginning. Sharp knocking jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window. 3 bulldozers waited on the road, along with a crew in hard hats and Eleanor Hargrove herself, standing impatiently on my porch. I threw on a robe and opened the door just enough to speak through. "You're trespassing." Again. Eleanor thrust a document toward me. "Emergency construction permit. Approved yesterday by the county executive office. We're breaking ground today." "That's impossible," I said, scanning the paper. "Projects need public notification periods and special economic development exemption," she interrupted. "If you attempt to obstruct county-approved work, Deputy Hargrove will arrest you for interference." My stomach twisted. "Deputy Hargrove?" Her smile widened. "My brother-in-law, newly promoted." I needed time to think. "I need to get dressed. Give me 10 minutes. 5, she snapped. "The crew is on the clock." I closed the door and rushed to my bedroom, calling Marcos while throwing on clothes. "They're here with bulldozers," I whispered when he answered. "They have some emergency permit I've never seen before." "Don't let them start work," Marcos urged. "Once they break ground, it gets much harder legally. How am I supposed to stop them? The sheriff is apparently related to the HOA president." "Stall them," he said. "I'm checking the system. This permit doesn't sound right." I grabbed Grandpa's original property maps and my work ID, then stepped onto the porch where Eleanor waited, tapping her expensive shoe. "I need to see proper identification for all workers," I said, drawing myself up, "and equipment safety certifications." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "This isn't your jurisdiction." I pulled out my county inspector badge. "Actually, it is. No commercial construction can begin without safety compliance verification." Her face flickered with surprise. "You're the inspector?" "Senior building inspector for the county," I confirmed. "And I need to see permits for watershed disruption, given that this area sits on a protected aquifer." One of the construction workers approached, looking uncertain. "Ms. Hargrove, we can't dig without water permits. That's a major violation." Eleanor's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. We have full authorization." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcos. "Emergency permit fake. Jackson never signed it." "Stall them." I stood my ground. "As county inspector, I'm issuing a stop work order until proper documentation is verified. Starting construction now would be a direct violation of County Code 35.7. The workers looked at each other nervously. "You can't do this," Eleanor hissed. "I just did," I replied, taking photos of the equipment. "Anyone breaking this order faces fines starting at $10,000 per day." The construction supervisor approached Eleanor. "We need to pause until this is cleared up," I can't risk my license. Eleanor's face flushed red. Fine. Pack up. She jabbed a finger at me. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. As the bulldozers retreated, I allowed myself a moment of relief. But I knew this was just round one. I spent the morning at the county records office with Marcos, combing through property files. What we found was disturbing. Look at this, Marcos said, pointing to a map. Meadowlark Estates doesn't even exist as a registered HOA. But this shell company, MGCE Holdings, has been buying land all around your property. MGCE, I repeated. The letters on their survey stakes. They've submitted plans for a major truck stop and shopping center, Marcos continued. But they need your land for highway access. We dug deeper, following paper trails through various departments. The pieces were starting to fit together: altered records, missing environmental reports, forged signatures. This goes beyond Eleanor, I murmured. Someone with serious county access is helping them. Marcos looked around nervously. We should copy everything. These records might start disappearing. As we worked, the records clerk approached. Someone's asking about you too. Man in an expensive suit. Says he's from the county executive's office. Through the window, I spotted a sleek-looking man speaking with Eleanor in the parking lot. That's Thomas Hargrove, Marcos whispered. The county executive himself. Related to Eleanor? Her brother-in-law. The family basically runs this county. We quickly gathered our evidence and slipped out the back door. In my car, Marcos showed me something on his tablet. MGCE Holdings, he explained. Registered to Thomas Hargrove, Eleanor's husband Richard, and someone named Catherine Everett. 3 guesses who Catherine is. No idea. Head of the County Planning Commission. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. They've rigged the entire system. As I drove Marcos back to his office, we passed my farm. My blood ran cold at the sight of workers ignoring my stop order, already clearing trees along the road. They're not stopping, I said in disbelief. Of course not, Marcos replied grimly. Thomas Hargrove can override any inspector in the county. Even you. I pulled over, taking photos of the illegal work. A security guard spotted me and started walking toward my car. We need to get this evidence somewhere safe, I said, pulling back onto the road. And I need a lawyer who isn't afraid of the Hargroves. That won't be easy to find in this county, Marcos warned. My phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered on speaker. Is this the stubborn farmer? Asked a smooth male voice. Who's calling? Thomas Hargrove, county executive. I understand you're causing problems for an important economic development project. You mean the illegal construction on my private property? I countered. He chuckled. Let's discuss this professionally. My office, tomorrow, 9 a.m. We can surely find a solution that works for everyone. I'll bring my lawyer, I said. That won't be necessary for a friendly conversation, he replied smoothly. Oh, and you might want to check your mailbox when you get home. I believe there's a notice about your job performance review being moved up. Curious timing. The call ended. Marcos and I exchanged worried glances. They're coming after your job, he said. And they won't stop there. I pulled into a gas station. I need to get these documents somewhere safe before anyone can destroy them. As I stepped out of the car, I spotted a black SUV pulling in behind us. The window lowered to reveal Deputy Hargrove. Afternoon, Inspector, he called. Mind if I have a word about some complaints we've received? Crash. The sound of splintering would jolted me awake at 5:30 a.m. I rushed to my window to see 3 massive yellow bulldozers smashing through my fence, their metal tracks tearing up the winter wheat I'd planted just last month. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and county inspector badge. Hey, stop right now, I shouted, running across my yard in pajamas and rubber boots. The workers didn't even look my way. One man deliberately turned up his radio as I approached. This is private property. You're trespassing. A gleaming black SUV with tinted windows rolled up, spraying gravel. Eleanor Hargrove stepped out wearing designer sunglasses despite the early hour, her perfect blonde hair unmoved by the morning breeze. "Sleep well?" she asked with a smile that chilled me. "We decided to get an early start." "You have no right to be here," I said, filming the destruction with my phone. "No permits have been approved for this work." Eleanor snapped her fingers and her assistant handed her a leather portfolio. "Actually, we have everything we need right here. Signed and approved yesterday." She held out a stack of official county documents. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the papers. There at the bottom of each page was a signature I recognized immediately, my coworker Diane's. The same Diane who had hugged me yesterday and promised to help fight the HOA. "This is impossible," I whispered. "These applications need environmental testing before approval. The Aquifer Protection Zone alone requires." "Page 15, Eleanor interrupted, tapping a manicured nail on the document. "Special exemption granted. Your colleague was surprisingly cooperative." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcos. "Urgent. Call me now." I stepped away from Eleanor and dialed him. "What's happening?" "Diane's husband just posted on Facebook about his amazing new job at Hargrove Construction," Marcos said, his voice tight with anger. "Executive position. Company car. Started yesterday." My stomach twisted. "They bought her." "That's not all," Marcos continued. "They're deleting files from the server. All the original property records for your farm. I'm downloading what I can, but someone's locked me out of the system." Eleanor was watching me, head tilted like a predator assessing wounded prey. "Problems?" I forced my face to remain calm. "No, just confirming my schedule." "I'll make this simple," Eleanor said, stepping closer. "The HOA is prepared to be generous. $200,000 for your inconvenience. You could buy a lovely unit in our Lakeview development. Tennis courts, monthly socials. No more worrying about farm equipment or weather damage." Her smile widened. "We take care of our own. My grandfather built this farmhouse with his own hands," I replied. "His parents are buried on this land. It's not for sale at any price." Eleanor's smile vanished. "I tried being reasonable. Remember that." She nodded to someone behind me. A heavy hand gripped my shoulder. I turned to see Sheriff's Deputy Hargrove, Eleanor's cousin, his face stern beneath his department issue hat. "We've received multiple complaints about you threatening construction workers and trespassing on HOA property," he said, hand resting on his holster. "I need your ID." "This is my property," I insisted. "I have the deed. The deed that shows this land was legally transferred to Meadowlark Estates HOA last month," Deputy Hargrove cut in. "Those records are on file at the county office. Maybe you should check them." Cold dread washed over me as I realized what they'd done. While Diane approved fake permits, someone else had been creating fraudulent property transfers. I handed over my ID, mind racing for a way out. Deputy Hargrove studied my county inspector badge with raised eyebrows. "Interesting position you have. Would be ashamed to lose it over trespassing charges." He handed back my ID. "I suggest you cooperate with the HOA. This development is happening whether you like it or not." Eleanor circled me slowly, taking photos of my farmhouse from different angles. "The demolition crew is scheduled for Friday. You might want to start packing." She paused, examining a photo on her phone. "Such outdated design. This area will look so much better with our premium gas station and mini-mart." My chickens scattered as a bulldozer rumbled near their coop, the driver grinning as he deliberately steered toward it. "You're destroying evidence of a crime," I called out desperately. "I'll file for an emergency injunction." Eleanor laughed, a cold tinkling sound. "With which judge? Judge Hargrove, my husband's brother? Or maybe Judge Wilson, whose son just joined our HOA board?" As she spoke, workers began unloading surveying equipment and gas station architectural plans. One unfurled a large banner with future home of Meadowlark Market and Fuel Center across it. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "Meet me at Rusty's Diner at noon. I can help. Come alone." Former HOA victim. Deputy Hargrove noticed my expression change. "More trouble brewing?" He touched his body camera meaningfully. Everything you say and do will be documented. For your protection, of course. I watched helplessly as the bulldozers continued destroying my crops, wondering who I could possibly trust when the Hargroves seemed to control every level of county government. The text message offered a glimmer of hope, but was it just another trap? Eleanor slid back into her SUV, rolling down the window one last time. By the way, I'd check your employment status if I were you. The county executive, my brother-in-law Thomas, is reviewing the inspector department budget today. Massive cuts expected. She smiled sweetly. You have 48 hours to accept our offer before it's withdrawn completely. As her SUV pulled away, I noticed something odd, an elderly woman with a cane watching from the road, taking photos with a small camera. When she saw me looking, she quickly shuffled away toward a waiting car. Who was she? Another Hargrove spy or something else entirely? You're fired. The words on my termination letter blurred as tears filled my eyes. I stood in the county building parking lot, cardboard box in hand, security guard watching to make sure I left. 2 hours after I'd arrived at work, I'd been escorted out. Budget cuts, the official reason. My desk had already been cleared when I arrived. In its place sat a miniature toy gas station with my farm's mailbox number painted on it. My coworkers had turned away as I walked past, only Marco staring to whisper, "Rusty's Diner. Noon. Don't forget." Rain began falling as I loaded my box into my truck. My phone buzzed with a foreclosure notice. Somehow the Hargroves had convinced the bank that I'd missed mortgage payments. Another text arrived. Final warning before utilities would be shut off for non-payment. They were erasing my life piece by piece. Rusty's Diner sat at the edge of town, a faded 1950s building with cracked vinyl booths and the best apple pie in the county. I pushed open the door at exactly noon, scanning the nearly empty restaurant. "Over here, dear." The voice came from a corner booth where an elderly woman waved a napkin at me. I recognized her immediately, the woman with the cane who'd been taking photos near my farm. Up close, I could see her eyes were sharp despite her frail appearance. "I'm Margaret Tanner," she said, gesturing to the empty seat across from her. "Former resident of Sycamore Heights before the Hargroves destroyed it." "How did you know about my farm?" I asked, sliding into the booth. "We've been watching the Hargroves for months," Margaret explained, tapping her cane against the floor, "tracking their pattern. When they started surveying near your property, we knew you'd be next." "We." The bell above the diner door jingled as 3 more seniors entered. A tall man with thick glasses, a tiny woman with a floral dress, and a distinguished-looking gentleman using a walker. "The Resistance," Margaret said with a wink. "Former homeowners who've lost everything to the Hargrove schemes." The tall man slid in beside me. "Harold Jenkins. They took my retirement home last year. Built a strip mall where my garden used to be." "Doris Washington," the tiny woman said. "Kindergarten teacher for 30 years. Now I live with my daughter because the Hargroves tripled my HOA fees until I couldn't pay." "And I'm Richard Gonzalez," said the man with the walker. "Former judge before Thomas Hargrove orchestrated my early retirement." My jaw dropped. "You were a judge? Can't you help expose them?" "They're very careful," Richard explained. "Create shell companies, use proxies, forge documents that would take years to prove fraudulent in court. By then, the damage is done." Margaret pulled a thick binder from her oversized purse. "But we have evidence. Lots of it. Records of every property they've seized, every official they've bribed, every homeowner they've bullied." I flipped through page after page of meticulously documented evidence, photos, meeting minutes, bank statements showing suspicious deposits to county officials' accounts. "Why show me this?" I asked. "I'm not even an inspector anymore." "Because you're still a property owner fighting back," Harold said, his voice firm. "And because we need someone on the inside with access to the county's digital records." "I don't have access anymore," I reminded them. "I was fired this morning." Margaret smiled slyly. "But your friend Marcos does. He's been helping us gather evidence for weeks." The diner door opened again, and Marcos slipped in, looking nervous. "I can't stay long," They're watching everyone who talks to you. He pulled out a flash drive. I downloaded what I could before they locked me out. Property records, permit applications, emails between the Hargroves and county officials. My heart raced with hope for the first time in days. What do we do with all this? First, Margaret said, we need to stop the demolition scheduled for your farm on Friday. How? They control everything: the courts, the sheriff's office, even the local media. Richard Gonzalez smiled for the first time. Not everything. My former clerk is now secretary to Judge Ramirez in the federal district court. The Hargroves haven't reached that far yet. And my son, Margaret added proudly, is the environmental correspondent for the State Tribune newspaper, outside the Hargroves' influence. Plus, Harold chimed in, I still have friends at the EPA regional office. That gas station they want to build? It sits directly over the county's main aquifer. Highly illegal without proper environmental safeguards. The waitress approached with coffee, causing everyone to fall silent. I noticed her name tag, Sandra Hargrove. Everything okay here? She asked, eyeing our group suspiciously. Just peachy, Margaret replied sweetly. Such a nice place to catch up with old friends. After Sandra walked away, Margaret leaned forward. Another cousin. They're everywhere. That's why we meet here, Doris whispered. Hide in plain sight. They're so confident. They don't think we'd dare meet under their noses. Marcos checked his watch. I need to get back. Thomas Hargrove called an emergency meeting with all department heads at 2 p.m. About what? I asked. Officially, new development projects. Unofficially, I think they're accelerating plans for your farm. Construction equipment is already staged at the county depot. My hands clenched into fists. We need to move fast. Already in motion, Richard said. I've drafted an emergency federal injunction based on environmental protection statutes. Judge Ramirez will see it this afternoon. And I've prepared this, Margaret added, sliding a folder toward me. Inside was a fully researched newspaper article detailing the Hargrove scheme, with supporting documentation. My son needs your statement to complete it. Front page tomorrow. They'll come after me hard, I warned. They might come after all of you. Harold adjusted his glasses. They already took everything from us. What else can they do? A text alert made everyone jump. Marcos checked his phone, face paling. They're moving even faster than we thought. The demolition crew has been rescheduled for tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. And, he hesitated. What? I prompted. Thomas Hargrove just sent an email about addressing the troublesome elements in the community. There's a list of names attached. He looked up grimly. All of you are on it. Margaret remained calm. Then we'd better finish our coffee and get to work. As our unlikely alliance planned our counterattack, I noticed Deputy Hargrove's patrol car slowly circling the diner's parking lot. Through the window, our eyes met briefly. His suspicious, mine determined. The game had changed. We weren't just fighting for my farm anymore, but to expose a conspiracy that had controlled our county for years. The question was, could we gather enough proof before the bulldozers arrived at dawn? Buzzing phones woke me before dawn, messages flooding in from strangers. Just saw you in the news. My stomach tightened as I clicked the link. The State Tribune's headline screamed across my screen. County corruption. HOA fraud scheme exposed. Mrs. Tanner's son had worked overnight, publishing everything: the forged documents, witness statements, and my anonymous quotes about the Hargroves land-grabbing scheme. I barely had time to dress before hearing chants outside. Peering through my curtains, I spotted elderly residents marching with handmade signs. Hands off our homes, and Hargroves equals criminals. Mrs. Tanner waved from the center of the crowd, her silver hair gleaming in the early light as TV cameras captured everything. They're blocking the bulldozers, Marcos shouted through the phone. You need to see this. I rushed to my south pasture where construction had begun. 20 seniors formed a human chain in front of heavy machinery, while workers stood confused, waiting for instructions. Eleanor was nowhere in sight. My phone buzzed, meeting with Thomas Hargrove canceled. Instead, A blocked number flashed on my screen. "You've made a deadly mistake," Eleanor hissed, her voice razor-sharp. "Do you understand who you're dealing with?" My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "I understand perfectly. What I don't think you understand is that gas station sits directly above a protected water source. As county inspector, I've just issued an emergency cease and desist order. You'll be unemployed within the hour. Possibly, but the state environmental office doesn't report to your brother-in-law. Their investigation team arrives this afternoon." I clutched my kitchen counter, hoping she couldn't hear the shakiness in my voice. Silence stretched between us before she spoke again. "What exactly do you want?" "My land untouched, the fake HOA dissolved, and payments to everyone whose property you've damaged." Her laugh crackled through the phone. "Or what? Another news story? Something bigger?" The FBI finds interstate wire fraud fascinating. Agent Carter seemed particularly interested in your family's banking history. The call ended abruptly. Within 20 minutes, workers began loading equipment onto trucks. Victory should have felt sweeter. Instead, cold dread settled in my stomach. People like the Hargroves, wealthy, connected, ruthless, never surrendered this easily. Proof came when Marcos called, voice cracking with panic. "They're wiping the county servers. Every permit record, zoning map, property transfer, vanishing right now." I grabbed my backup drives and raced toward the county building. Without those digital records, it would be my word against theirs, and they owned half the judges in the county. Rain pelted my windshield as I swerved into the parking lot, nearly hitting a black luxury car pulling away. Thomas Hargrove himself sat behind the wheel, a cardboard box visible on his passenger seat. Our eyes locked. His face showed no anger, only smug confidence. My phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "Check your property deed." Attached was a document I'd never seen before, freshly dated, transferring my farm to Meadowlark Estates Holdings for non-payment of association fees, with my forged signature at the bottom. Clutching my laptop in the pouring rain, I watched Thomas drive away, taking with him what looked like every official record that could have saved my family's land. And somewhere in the distance, I heard sirens approaching. Smoke choked me awake. Flames already licked up my bedroom wall as I stumbled from bed, disoriented and coughing. Someone pounded frantically on my front door, Mrs. Tanner's grandson, a college kid who'd volunteered to watch my farm overnight. "Get out now," he screamed through the door. I grabbed only my dog and Grandpa's old metal lockbox of family photos before diving through the door. We collapsed on the damp grass as my roof caved in with a terrible groan, sparks shooting skyward. Fire trucks arrived too late to save anything. The fire chief shook his head, clipboard in hand. "Looks like faulty wiring." His eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Faulty wiring that catches fire the same night I challenged the most powerful family in the county?" I whispered to Mrs. Tanner as she wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. "They're sending a message." But the Hargroves had badly miscalculated. I'd already prepared for their revenge. "They think they've destroyed your evidence," Marco said, handing me a coffee as we huddled in his garage that morning. "They have no idea." I pulled Grandpa's lockbox onto my lap and clicked it open. Inside lay not just photos, but 3 identical thumb drives. Every document, every recording backed up and distributed to 20 different people, including Agent Carter at the FBI. Mrs. Tanner squeezed my hand. "The council called an emergency meeting about your unauthorized actions. It starts in an hour." The county building buzzed with angry voices as we arrived. Residents from all 4 neighborhoods targeted by the Hargroves packed the chamber. Seniors, families, farmers, all wearing bright red "Stop the Fraud" stickers. News cameras lined the back wall. Thomas and Eleanor Hargrove sat smugly at the center table, their expensive lawyer whispering between them. Thomas stood, straightening his tie. "These wild accusations against my family are completely unfounded," he announced, voice echoing through the microphone. The property in question was legally acquired through proper channels. Unfortunately, the county server malfunction yesterday corrupted key files that would prove our case. Several council members nodded sympathetically. My legs shook as I approached the podium. Mr. Hargrove seems unaware that county inspectors must maintain independent backup records of all building permits and zoning changes. I plugged a thumb drive into the council's computer. These files clearly show no legal rezoning ever occurred for my property. Eleanor whispered urgently to her husband. Thomas just smiled. Those could easily be fake, he said dismissively. Anyone could create false documents. You're right about that, I agreed, clicking to the next file. But what about this? The room speakers crackled with Thomas's own voice. Eleanor handled the signatures perfectly. Nobody will notice they're forged. I've paid off the right people. If the inspector keeps nosing around, we'll handle it like we did with that problem in Riverdale. Gasps filled the chamber. Thomas lunged toward the computer. That recording is a fake and illegally obtained. Quite the opposite, came a deep voice from the back doors. A tall man in a dark suit strode down the center aisle, flanked by agents in FBI windbreakers. That recording was obtained with a federal warrant, Mr. Hargrove. Agent Carter held up his badge. Thomas and Eleanor Hargrove, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy to commit forgery, and attempted arson. Thomas's face drained of color as an agent handcuffed him. You can't do this to me. I own this county. Eleanor twisted toward me as they led her away. This isn't finished, she hissed. Mrs. Tanner stepped to my side, shoulders squared despite her age. Actually, it is. The state just froze all Hargrove assets pending investigation, and the council voted unanimously to dissolve all fraudulent HOA entities. 6 months flew by in a blur of depositions and rebuilding. I stood on my porch steps, watching volunteers plant the last trees around my new farmhouse. Where bulldozers had once torn up my soil, a community garden now flourished, tended by former HOA victims who'd become my friends. My phone rang, Agent Carter calling with news. The Hargroves had taken a plea deal, revealing corrupt officials throughout the state in exchange for lighter sentences. We could use someone with your skills, he said. The Bureau needs people who can spot document fraud and stand up to pressure. I watched Mrs. Tanner teaching neighborhood kids how to plant tomatoes in what would have been a gas station parking lot. Thanks, but my place is here. Some fights are worth seeing through to the end. As we hung up, a caravan of cars approached the weekly meeting of our new community watchdog group. What started as resistance against one corrupt family had grown into something more powerful. Neighbors protecting neighbors. I walked down to greet them, boots crunching on the gravel path my grandfather had laid decades ago. My farm wasn't just land anymore. It had become something the Hargroves never understood and could never take away. Proof that ordinary people standing together can defeat even the most powerful bullies.